Hi, everyone. Thank you
Hi.
so much for being here for the Still Standing podcast hosted by me, Shannon Torrence, and my pirate eye. It's a result of a little Botox mishap. No big deal. I'm just going to be
Flow through
winking at you
that.
the whole time. Well, we're going to
Yes.
roll through it. And today I'm so excited because I have with me Precious
The
Harris
hair is
McCray.
long.
It is
It
long.
is long.
It's Precious Harris McCray. And
Yes.
the reason I have Precious on today is that I believe, was it the Dose of Society on Instagram?
Was it? I don't know if it was Cuties.
It was okay. Yeah, it was
Cuties
one of,
NYC.
I think so. It was one of those Instagram accounts that I follow where they stop couples on the street and say,
Yes.
"Hey,
Yes.
are you guys a couple?" And they're like, "How did
Yes.
you meet?" Well, Precious won my heart and her partner won my heart. They're
Yes.
just so cute. And Precious described or talked about their meeting as being a meeting in recovery. And I thought, oh, she would be amazing for this podcast. So now that I've gotten to know her a little better, love her, and just absolutely thrilled to have you on today.
Thank you for
Precious,
having me.
welcome, welcome, welcome. So, Precious is a boxer and really thriving despite all of her challenges. So I'd love to hear your life story, Precious. I know that this is a very big thing to unpack, but I want to know all about you
Right.
and kind of what your journey was, what your background was like, what your
Word.
childhood would like, what was like,
Yeah.
whatever you feel comfortable sharing. Hit it.
Yes. Very good. So, okay, cool. We'll flow. So I would say I don't know. I was always told that like when I came into this world, they said that I was smiling. Like I had a big smile. Like as a newborn, I came into the world like ready to go. But I would say, I mean, I'm a fighter, right? I'm a professional boxer. And I use boxing to enhance my understanding of myself and my spirituality, which means I'm really tapped into emotions, right? And so that comes from where we get into my lifestyle, just being in this world. So I came from my father, amazing man, did the best that he could. Was a big, we call it street general, right? Like big, big, big in the streets. My mother had me at a really young age. I would say she was like this really pure, pure woman. And got kind of caught up with the street guy. And so I was young. I was raised in a really rough household. And so my mom was a really young mother, really young. And so I ended up being taken in by my half sister's mom when I was like 2 or 3. And her mom, who's like my grandmother for all intents and purposes, she was a there what is the she worked for Bank of America. She was a trust fund, like whatever she did when children had trust funds, her job was to investigate who wants to try to use their money and if it will benefit the child. So she was big on like working with children, working with kids needs. So she was always there for me. And so I spent a majority of my time, me and my half sister, with my grandmother. And my grandmother was always like, Precious is special. She's super gifted. I love to be in nature. I always ask questions. You know what I mean? I was that kid. Like, why does this work? Why is this way? And I was really aware of feelings all the time. But my stepmother and also like my father and mother, growing up in that how it goes, the programmed ways, ignorance, poverty. I was just always really unique, and I grew up in a very abusive household. My half mother my half sister my stepmother, my half sister's mom, was a very, 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 very emotionally abusive, and then as I got older, physically, extremely physically abusive. So I grew up in this household, but no one knew. Um, it happened after her father died, and when we moved to Texas when I was like 8 or 9, we moved away. So there wasn't that balance of like grandma to take care of things, and she was a single mom, and so like my upbringing was really hard because everyone knows society is really weird depending on what city you live in and everything. And to move to the South at like 10 years old and being in an abusive household, that was okay there. And so I went through this really traumatic and like turmoil period of being this really bright, happy soul, but at home I was going through all of this stuff. I was taught not to cry. I was taught it's not okay. But then when I'm leaving, you know what I mean? I learned to switch it on and off. I leave and I'm like I'm in school and I'm happy, and no one knows what's going on. And so that was a majority of my life, like going, when I was in school. School was not for me. I could ace any test you asked me to take, even if I didn't study, but my attention span was just always floaty in the clouds and busy. Um, my half mother would like try to teach me to fight. Like she would try to, but I just wasn't into it. I would say that I'm a pro boxer now. I'm definitely like top 5 prospects in the world. It's no doubt I'm going to be going big places. But I was a lover, not a fighter, right? And I had to learn to be able to be aware of my emotions and people around me. So it's intense, right? When you think about that, right? You think about a child going through that. But in the positive, we always have to look at why we went through the things we went through. And like my hyper awareness of myself and humans around me is beautiful. Like I've always been able to be aware of how people are feeling, what's going on, the process. Um, so it was really rough. Like I feel like there's so much in there, right? Which I learned to not feel. So, but no one knew that, right? So I'm like 15. By the time I was like, when I was 14, I came out the closet, and my stepmom's mother moved to Ireland. She was Irish, and she like sent an email, and she's like, "Why are you mad? Like we've known since Precious was like 8 years old that there was a little something going on there. Like it is what it is." And she wasn't having it. On top of it, with respects, I grew up in the church, right? And so I'm a spiritual being. I understand religion, how it connects us, how it can connect us and disconnect us in all the different ways. But the religious community where we moved in the South was extreme. So by every means of the word, I was Bible thumped. I was beat, the efforts to try to beat this out of me. I just wanted to be honest and authentic. And I had to go through this process of like in enhanced abuse. Mind you, I'm still going to school. They're like, Precious is just so bright and just so happy. And I'm going through this process. My father at the time was in and out of prison. You know what I mean? He always was able to provide for the most part for all of his kids. Papa was a Rolling Stone. I'm the oldest of 13. You know what I mean? But it was just really rough. I mean, that's really just the truth of the matter. Was a majority of my, up until I got to about 18, life was, it was a shit show. It was really a shit show. And it was just me learning to be this happy being while dealing with all this misery and not really understanding why, right? And developing. um when I was about 14, 15, I was kicked out the house, um because of my sexuality. And I ended up, being in the streets, in and out, going to school. I'm still going to school. I ended up living with an aunt who took care of me for my senior year. And I like elevated. I was in a safe space. It was beautiful. And then I was big basketball player, Division 1 recruited, ended up going to a junior college. The junior college I went to was in Kansas. It was really racist. Ended up leaving that. And I joined the military when I was 18. So that's where the warrior Precious got triggered, right? Like I was like, I didn't, I had to fight a few times through these years, and I was always able to protect myself. There's, that darkness we talk about, like, even when I was young, like it would come out, like I would take a certain amount of abuse, and then I would like go to my room, and like she would come in the room and be like, "What's wrong with you?" Like this. And I would like, something like would trigger in me, and I would be like, "I hate you." And it was like this big dark, and she would be like, "You're demonic." But it was really just like this protective, I've had enough energy. And whatever I was showing, for some reason, I didn't, just yelling got her out my face. Right. So we can get into that energy later, because that's my energy when it comes to boxing. Right. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful understanding that. But I joined the military, and I just remember being in basic training and absolutely falling in love with working out. Oh my God. The extreme intense. There's something about like working out and going beyond pain that I was like, I can do it. I was always told I couldn't do this. I couldn't do that. They used to make me pick between, I was on the state choir team and I was on the basketball team, and they'd be like, you can only do this or that. And the choir teacher would be like, you're only 5'2" right now. Like, you're not really gonna make a college team. So why would you go play in the tournament coming up? Right. And so I had to hear that. But then I'd go to my coach, and my coach is like, you're not really gonna go to the choir tournament. Like, it's for what? What's that gonna do for you? How that's gonna get you to college? So I have all these opposing forces that I would have to deal with, and always trying to limit me, just really limit who I am as a child and just as a being. And I just was always willing. I wanted to explore. I had such an artistic nature in different ways. And so when I got into the military, I was just like, yo, I'm built for this. But I was really hyper aware of the systems. So I was like, also like the programming, I'd be watching and being like, yeah, no, I'm not doing this. I was in the military. I joined the military after I graduated, so like 2006. So it was still like 9/11 was still a big thing. We were still at war. And I remember there being classes where like they're training us to call every person from the Middle East a Haji. They're all sand Hajis. Like, we're in class getting programmed. And I remember being like, yeah, this isn't cool. Meanwhile, we have like a military soldier right next to us who's like a refugee who got, his parents got killed, and he's right next to us. And he, in fact, is from the Middle East, and he's hearing this. And I'm aware of all this type of stuff. I'm like, but I'm also like, but I really like it here. There's discipline, there's organization. You know what I mean? There's teamwork. There's all these things I was denied, and I'm learning. And then I'm finding my warrior nature. I remember a drill sergeant telling me, we're outside and we have different platoons, but it's raining and we're getting ready to do this crazy course. And I'm like cheering for everybody. And all of a sudden I move 100 soldiers, and they're like cheering. And this drill sergeant is watching me, and he walks up to me. I understand now, I didn't then. And he is like, you are something. He's like, you just moved 100 soldiers. You just motivated all these soldiers. And he's like, I don't know if you're a great soldier, but I can tell you, you are the most fucking motivated soldier I've ever seen in my life. He's like, I've never seen anything like this. And I'm just like, yeah, like I'm feeling good. Cause if we got to do it, why not do it with a good attitude? Right. Like, I've always been this way. And so, I joined the military, I joined the reserves, I got out. And I mean, it was a journey. It's been a journey. So like, that's 18. We're at 19. And I was dating a girl who was like my high school sweetheart when we had been dating since I was like 17. But I got out of the military. I was still a reservist, but when you're in the military as an active duty, it's easy. They pay for everything. You don't have to really think about being a grown up and all this stuff. And so I had to be back from training. So I had two issues, right? I had the issues of, I was never really taught how to be an adult in the world. I was taught how to survive, right? I was taught that, when I'm 16 trying to get food and all these things, and then I had my father taught me how to be a warrior, but I also understood the lifestyle of how to get things illegally, right? And I didn't want to do that. I'm like, I'm this pure soul. I'm like, I don't want to do that. And I see how things hurt people and how people are affected. My mom, at the time, I'm 19. My birth mother, beautiful soul, was an addict. So I would see her sometimes when I was in Seattle. I'm from Seattle, and I would not see my mom for months at a time, and then I would see her, and we'd never skip a beat. But she'd be like, she was a prostitute, she was an addict, she was, and so I understand both spectrums. The spectrum of like being in the streets and selling the drugs and elevating and being the addicts and all that. And like, I was like, I don't really want to do that. And so when I got out of my training, I was like, oh shit, like I have to be an adult. What is this? What does this mean? And I thought being a mechanic in the military, I could come out and get a job as a mechanic, but it doesn't work like that. They're like, you still got to go to school and get certifications. And I'm like, but I just did 8 months of training. And they're like, it doesn't work like that. And I'm like, well, how am I supposed to get in school? And I don't know. And again, I'm on my own. I've really ultimately been on my own since I was like 16, right? I had some support units here, but I have not had anyone to teach me and have these understandings. And then I went into the military, and the military did everything for me. Really, when you think about it, I didn't have to think really when it came to jobs. I was working. I had everything given to me. I could train and then look at my bank account and it was there. I had housing. I had all these things. So I'm back in the world, and mind you, I'm in Texas. And at this time, like 2008, 2009. And it's fair to say, like, when it comes to poverty levels, it doesn't matter our realities. You know what I'm saying? When it came to poverty levels and living in certain areas and all that, it just wasn't it. You know what I mean? There's no help. You don't get support. You don't understand how things are. And so when I did that, I got back and I'm like, I have all this money, and I had like $20,000 in my bank account, and I spent that in like 2 weeks. I
Easy
like
to
take
do.
my friend. Yeah, I get back home, and I'm like, to all my friends and all the people I care about and any family members, we're going out. I'm buying everybody in the house, in different houses, groceries. I'm going out to clubs. I'm paying for everything. I'm just making sure everybody's good. And like, I ended up staying with a friend of mine who's with her and her parents. She had two moms. We grew up together playing basketball, and they're like, you can stay with me. And like, she's telling me like, you're gonna have to move out in 3 months, right? I'm not even thinking anything about it. It goes in one little 19, 20-year-old ear, one little 19, and 18, right? And out. I'm like, cool. And I'm just spending my money. I'm like, I didn't think about getting a job. I didn't even know. Like, people are like, you should try to get a job. I'm like, all right, cool. I'm like not even able to conceptualize like what that means. And no one around me for real, like, is around me outside of, my friend's mom works. Like, nobody around me worked. So like, they're like telling me you should get a job. And I'm like, "Uh, what does that entail? Like, how do you even go about getting a job?" I literally didn't know. They're like, you can walk into a place. I'm like, yeah, I'm not dealing with humans. I'm not walking in. And so, long story short, time ran up. I was dating a girl, and I ended up going into the route of having to live with someone that I was dating. And that's where I learned about toxic relationships, right? And I went through years of like, by this time, I was learning, I had started smoking weed, right? I'm smoking like a lot of weed a day. And I start doing cocaine, right? So this is where my, like, it starts. It's like 18. I'm like, fuck, I'm going through it. And I'm like, something's got to give. I'm stuck in this lifestyle. And ultimately I didn't know then, but I'm running away from dealing with life. I'm like, I don't know. I didn't know how to cope, right? I'm like, I'm like partying, I'm drinking, I'm hanging out with people that are just going to let me stay at their house. We're doing all these things. And I'm like, I have to get out of this place. Like, I have to leave. Like, this city, this place is not conducive to my health. So I have like $200 in my pocket. And my dad's getting ready to get out of jail, and he calls me, and I'm like, yo, I gotta leave. It's a Monday. He's like, I got you, your aunts, my family members I haven't seen in years. Again, rough family, both bloodlines, very rough family. I'm Blackfoot, you know what I'm saying? I'm Jamaican, like, you know what I mean? Just rough bloodlines. He's like, you can stay with your aunt. I'm like, all right, cool. So on a Monday, with $300 in my pocket, I spent $200. Back then it's cheap, right? I spent $200 on one way, and I leave on Wednesday with a duffel bag. I like I'm like telling the women I love, a little heartbreaker, I'm like, I'm leaving in 2 days. They're like, where are you going? I'm like, well, you can't help me, and I'm not mad at you, but like, look at me, I have to do, like, I can't, there's nothing for me here. Right. I tried calling my stepmom, and, no one wanted to help me. And I'm just like, and mind you, no one really knows what I'm going through. No one really know. Even the women I'm dating, no one really knows what's happening because I'm so internal, right? And so I get to Seattle, and I mean, long story to cut that short, my father and I's relationship, he just couldn't, when people like 14, like the last time he saw me, I think I was like 12. And so he kind of was like, oh, you're this 12-year-old kid. I need to like micromanage, but he's also got this like street mentality of controlling women. And I'm just getting out of training in the military. I'm doing all these things. And I'm also like, I was always there's rebellious triggers that triggered in me. So I'm like, bro, you're not going to control anything. Like, you're not going to control me. You know what I mean? My father was, he was the spectrum of pure narcissism, but like didn't care. Like he might beat women up in front of the police and not care. To like driving down the street, see a homeless man in the road, pull his car over, take $1,000 leather jacket off his back, put it on the homeless man, walk the homeless man across the street, give him $500 out of his pocket, and get back in the car for me to see everything. Right. So there's this extreme,
Wow.
like dual nature. Right. Like I grew up with this, like, yo, so I'm like, and he was always authentic. Right. Listen, the most, I don't, I'm going to tell you, when it comes to duality, I say this all the time. When it comes to good and not good, I just need people to be authentic, because there's no man, there's no person I've ever met that was more authentic than this man. He told you the truth, and I understand that narcissism has these ranges, but like he was who he was, and he wasn't afraid to be who he was. He didn't care. He just was who he was, and he was honest. And he taught me, like, why do you need to lie about who you are? Either be who you are or don't. Like that's so I learned this. And so again, the positives, right? We take all these great positives and like being able to see these natures. I was always observing natures of people. Like I was able to see the dark. I was able to see light just growing up, like, oh, like really seeing like, oh, that person's foul. What's foul and good? What does that mean? How is that possible? What is that? And just in these energies. Um, and I ended up having to leave being at my aunt's and being with my father. Like it was toxic. And so I chose homelessness over toxicity. Right. And so with that, being homeless and going, I was able to connect with a lot of street people. I was in and out of hotels. I was around different environments, but my drug addiction peaked again. We're only on 1920. Like,
You've lived such an
I'm
interesting
telling
life
you.
by 19.
Yes, this is, and it's intense. Like there's so many stories, little stories in between, right? Um, I get back to Seattle, right? I leave my dad's, but my father is so known, my family's so known in Seattle that I can walk around and the police know by my face who you wrote Gills, you a Harris? Like, I'm like, yeah, yeah, they're like, you're not you're not like your father, death row, are you? You're not gonna be trouble, are you? You know what I mean? Like just known, like, no, I'm not. So I ended up doing the homeless thing. Again, drugs, cocaine, ecstasy, weed, alcohol. I joined a college program because I want to play basketball. I want to play basketball. I'm like, it's my first love. I want to play basketball. I want something in me. I want to do this. So I'm like homeless in this college, community college, playing basketball, trying to cope with life. Um, and I just hit rock bottom. Like I remember looking in the mirror in a hotel room, and I feel like every person who's gone through not just like needing recovery, but just life, where you look in the mirror at yourself and you're like, oh my God, who, like, am I dead? Like, who is this? I remember waking up, and it was from a night that probably I did so much it should have killed me. You know what I mean? Like one of those, I'm just so tired of life and I'm tired and I just want to cope. And I woke up and I remember looking in the mirror like, oh, fuck no. Precious, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. And I remember contacting my mom, who by this time I have a 14-year-old sister and we're connected. I haven't met her in person yet. And I have an 8-year-old sister and we haven't connected yet. So I'm Precious. We have our baby sister Princess, and then we have Larisha through our mom. And then we have our brother Rashad, who had to get sent through foster care. He's adopted now. So I call my mom and I'm like, I heard you're staying with my sister's dad. Like y'all are doing really well. And I'm like, I need help. Right. So I used to ask people for help and just not get it. And so I just never asked for help. Right. On top of everything else of not, you know, just being secretive and internal. So I go to their house and I'm staying with them. And my mom is, she's an addict. She leaves the house days at a time, comes back, she's drunk. You know what I mean? But she's a beautiful soul. Goes through it, but beautiful soul. And I'm getting time with my sisters and I start going to church. I'm like, cool, I'm about to go back to church. Like I'm not with the extreme, but I do know when the message is meant for me, I'm not gonna get mad at the messenger, right? So I'm like in church chilling. And I'm like, and I'm dressed like this, because come as you are, don't play with me. Like, I'm like, we gonna see what kind of church you are. Because if I can't come as I am, I'm not supposed to be here. And so I'm like getting messages and I'm like, okay, cool. And I stay with them and I'm getting my life back on track. And I meet a woman and I'm 20 and she has a 2-year-old son. And from 20 to 20, like 5, I'm with this woman. We have a domestic partnership. I raise her son. We have a wedding, like for our domestic partnership. And when he's 7, so like what do you say, 5 years into our partnership, we decide to have a baby. M- Mind you, this is where boxing comes into play. So right, so I tried boxing. Queen Underwood is a she used to be an Olympian, and she met me when I started dating. Jamie is her name. Longest relationship. She looked at me and she was like, "You should box." Right? I'm in this domesticated relationship and it's perfect for me. I like stop the drugs. It's just innate. I meet her, I meet this child, and I remember the first time I met him after dating her for 2 weeks, and he walks up to me and he grabs my thumb and rubs it and he's like, "Hi." And he's like, "In my soul." And I'm like, nothing else matters. I don't know you, but nothing else. I need to get my life together for you. Like, right? I'm like, oh my God. And so I become this parent and immediately go into domestic partner mode. I'm like very nurturing, very masculine, very balanced. Um, and when I'm 21, 22, Queen's like, you should box. And she's like, you ever boxed? And I'm like fight? I was like, I mean, only because I had to. Like, and she's like, something like, she's like, nah, I know you should box. So I try it for a few months and it's just life is really challenging. So I tried doing the fitness classes and I fell in love, but I ended up leaving boxing. I'm like, there's just too much happening. You know what I mean? To be with all my experiences to be 20, on top of it, our relationship was very toxic, right? We're very young, right? Domesticated, young, toxic. We're trying to figure it out, the highs and lows. Um, I'm at boxing and I fall in love with it. So I'm in boxing like 3 times a week. And I'm gone too long. Like, so I was like, okay, let me bring it back. Um, when I was 24, she was pregnant and I fell asleep and I had a dream. Now, these are years after I tried boxing. I fell asleep and I had a dream. And in my dream, I opened my eyes and there's all these bright lights everywhere. And I hear people cheering and I can see I'm at a crazy level. I'm boxing. I just can remember it being pitch black, opening my eyes, seeing all these lights, hearing, feeling the energy, and knowing when I woke up, I'm supposed to box. The first thing I did was like find a girl I used to know from training and a trainer. And I'm just like, yo, I need to box. That's where my boxing journey started. I'm like, I know I'm supposed to do something great with boxing. At the time, I thought it was Olympics, right? So I'm like, cool. So I start boxing. And the moment I start committing to boxing, my life goes upside down. Like it was already kind of there. You don't notice the red flags. It was like the universe like preps you, like, oh yeah, that tower is about to hit that tower card. Like,
I
and
always
so
call them tower moments.
tower moments, it's coming.
Hmm.
And so I start boxing and I'm also working as a restoration technician. So I'm working 120 hours a week. I get flown to Kentucky for tornado disasters and to work. Yeah, I'm working, I'm cleaning up bodies, like cleaning up scenes. Like the work is intense, but I'm making a lot of money and I'm coming home. I'm working in fire disasters, just all kinds of stuff, but I'm providing for my family, right? I'm providing. Um, but now I'm boxing too. So I'm figuring out how to drive my box truck in between job sites to go train for 2 hours, right? We're picking up my trainer at the time was looking for a space. So I'm taking the boxing bag out of her car and carrying it in my old neighborhood. And we're hanging the boxing bag on the hoop in the pavilion and we're working out there. And so I'm like, this is what we're doing. She knows I'm meant to do really big things. Um, the woman I'm with, we have a condo, we're doing all this. I'm multitasking like crazy and I'm just burnt out. And she ends up cheating on me and we end up splitting. And I end up leaving her everything. And long story short, I keep training. I see the kids every now and then because there's 2 now, right? But she's playing that game of like, if you don't want to be with me, you can't see them. And I had to go through a lot of turmoil with that, a lot of turmoil, you know. And eventually she got, within that year, she got a new girlfriend and she cut me off completely. Yeah, it was very hard, right?
Yeah.
So like and people think like, oh, well, what about her family and all these things? But I would like called her mom one day crying, like, 5, 6 years of developing a child that wasn't mine. And then we have this new child who's just turned 1, and everyone knows me and parenting, and we've been through, like, how can you just cut me off? And she's like, if I don't cut you off, and she's like, I'm so sorry. If I don't cut you off, she won't let me see the kids. And she hangs up. So immediately depression, right? So from 25, 26 to 27, I crash again. I go back to doing drugs while I'm boxing. So like I'm like going through it, like I'm boxing, but I'm also like I'm renting out a room. I'm doing drugs. I'm drunk. I'm like, I got an overnight job, right? I overnight job now, and I have a part-time construction job because I left my restoration job because I just can't focus and I can't try to save lives and do these things. Like, but I'm doing all these things and I'm just trying to figure it out. And like the more I'm boxing, I'm like, oh my God, it's a lot. Like I'm thinking to myself, like, this is a lot. So I start being high when I'm boxing. Like they don't know. I'm fucking going in the bathroom and like doing a line,
Yeah.
coming out and boxing. Like I'm doing it. They have no idea. You know what I'm saying? They're just, something's off with Precious. I know they know something's off with Precious. And so my trainer ends up hiring an energy worker to start coming to the gym. And so I'm working, I'm living with my trainer. I'm dating a girl who's abusive by this time, right? So I was single for a while. Then I started dating this woman. I helped her out of an abusive relationship. I told her, I was like, I told myself not to, all that. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. And I end up, working with this energy worker and just breaking down like my life. And I'm like, it's too much. And I was like, I'm not allowed to feel. I'm always angry. And she started working with me, and we started working with flower and essences, and we started working with how emotions are held in the body and what happens in boxing when emotions are in my body and what I'm holding on to and what I'm not, where it's held at. And so I ended up going through like a dark night of the soul because of the energy work and everything. And I like disappeared. And I realized like I'm supposed to go pro boxing. So I ended up meeting a woman, going up to upstate New York and working with a trainer named Raphael to see if I really was prepared for pro. So I moved to upstate New York, Plattsburgh, and back in the spaces like Mike Tyson used to train out in the middle of nowhere. And for 2 years, I really just trained at a pro level. Like there were days where I would dread training for like months at a time. Like it was so hard. It's that training still to this day is the hardest thing I think I've ever done in my life.
And you've been
Like,
in the military.
and I've been in the military. Oh my
Yeah.
God. That and I'm sure that's why that helped push me, not to mention everything I've been through, right? But it was like I was going through it and just doing it, doing it, doing it. I ended up dating a woman out there. We end up getting married. But right before that, we moved to Plattsburgh together. We end up getting married. She's from Plattsburgh. Um, and like the depression of my son and everything, like all this trauma that I've just been trying to ignore, working through emotions, but not recognizing trauma. You know how you live in trauma in your head every day. I was doing that all the time, reliving events, all that, but no one knew. So I'm just this positive being. And it all showed up at once. And I crash again, back to the drugs. Right. And Plattsburgh is this town where it's like extreme. There's nothing there. So it's like party, do drugs, or like do something else, which is usually working out, lifting weights, boxing, unless you have your business. And I crashed and burned. Um, and I got married. And because I was crashing and burning, she divorced me. Great choice. Good for her.
Yeah.
Best thing she could have done for her. Best thing she could have done for me. But during the process, I started journaling and learning. I started getting therapy. And through therapy and like studying, I was studying, like I read psychology books. I started like self-educating and reading all these books and doing all these things, like literally studying, understanding how the human brain works. And I was like, oh, my prefrontal cortex is damaged. How do I elevate? And just like literally like teaching myself how to be a psychologist and understand myself. Um, I elevated. I woke up. I just I woke up. And when I woke up, I was like, okay, cool. I'm going back to Seattle. So I moved back to Seattle. Now I'm 30, right at the time. I moved back to Seattle. And basically from there to now, it was just training. It was training, it was competing in amateur. And it was being really woke on the like in spiritually. Like I'm like, okay, really just elevating myself. And then in 2019, I decided to start taking spiritual trips. And I went on, Kashima, my partner, her and I went on a spiritual, we were friends before that, but we ended up going on a spiritual trip um to Egypt. And you start in Nubia with the original people of Egypt. And they did like initiations where they like welcome you back home to the soil.
So
And you're
cool.
working with shamans and healers. And like my world just kind of went. We also went into the pyramids at night. We had we did all these just amazing things like sound chambers, just opening up our soul. And I kept seeing like flashes of like boxing and all that. Mind you, I'm still competing. I'm still boxing. I'm an amateur. And I came back to Seattle and I kept doing these trips every year. And by this time, Kashima and I, there a lot of time went by. I was single. We ended up dating. And I visit Brooklyn and I'm like, oh, I'm going to go pro here. So I go back to Seattle, go back to Seattle, and I make the move to Brooklyn. And so I get to Brooklyn. And like, long story short, I get to Brooklyn and I have to be in like the shelter program. New York is crazy. New York
Yeah.
is so expensive. Oh my God. Right. So like your dream, it's if you're not from there and if you're not prepared, it's off the hook. So I'm like going through the shelter systems while training because I know I'm gonna go pro. I end up getting an apartment and I train for a year and I'm boxing. And I end up meeting Jose Guzman, who's an amazing pro trainer. And he sees me box and he's just like, and he connects me to TMA management, which is they're newer, but they're a huge, huge management company. And I get signed. And so now we're here and I'm in like all my dreams are coming true mode. And so that's, I would say like as far, so recovery hit, just so you know, my mom passed last April and I crashed and burned. And I checked out from the world. I was training and I checked out for a month. And I was like doing drugs at parties, very aware of myself, very aware of what I was doing. I was like, everyone's so happy to be around me while I'm in myself miserable. And I'm like, yeah, I know, universe, I'm going to have to stop doing this. Just give me a couple more weeks, please, before I have to check into everything and grieve. And I know I'm supposed to go pro and I'm going to do it, but I have to give up all this. Okay. All right, cool. And I did my process for like a month. I checked back in and I've been just booming ever since. Right? Understanding like I'm in with the feelings and with the emotions and with everything. So like I use boxing as a process, but that's where we're at.
I have chills. Precious, your
Yeah.
life it's a
Yeah, it's a
movie.
lot.
There's going to be a movie about this. If I
Precious
don't
too,
write,
not like the first one.
right, exactly. I might even, this is inspiring. Wow. I'm so moved by your story and just your, I don't want to say positivity. It's not that simple. The question I have for you is, it sounds like you've always just been like innately, your soul is a joyful soul. Your soul is a loving soul. So
The heart
despite
chakra
the
I came in with it open. Doof,
you
doof.
did. And that's, I think, part of the story. But I want to ask you, like, during all of these hard times, what kept you going? I mean, what was it that why didn't you give up?
I tried a couple times.
Yeah. I mean,
You
this,
know,
yeah.
yeah. I tried. I mean, overall, like, purpose is everything, right? And so those times that I really did want to give up, I was always given purpose, right? There was just always purpose. Um, Purpose is everything, you know. Um, and I feel like there was just an innate, like, I knew that I'm meant to being in service is a beautiful thing. And I just always knew that I was always supposed to help people and help the world. Like, I daydreamed about it. I'd all day, even as a child, like, I would watch movies and be like, people need help. Like, this world is, we need to help people. We need to help people. And I feel like that was like the driving force of understanding that this world needs good, and people need help, and they need people that are strong, that are still willing to love through it all, but also need protectors, right? And that's a different type of energy and look, as someone who has the ability to protect, but also I'm all about unconditional love, right? And even in protecting and having to, like, if I have to put hands on somebody to protect someone, it's really out of love. Like, I'm helping us all, right? Like, it's in that. But I feel like giving it, like, that's what drove me, really, is like, because there's always, like, I'm like, I'm there's something extra. But I really feel like a lot of times, like, I feel like the universe and, like, Yahweh chimed in a lot. It's like, as soon as I was ready to give up, I would, like, meet somebody on the road or something that, like, needed me. I'll never forget, like, I was walking depressed, and one day I wanted to, like, give up in Plattsburgh, and it's like 30 degrees outside, and I'm like, I think today's my day. And there's four children ranging from ages like 6 to 13, chasing one who's 7, barefoot, freezing. And the 7-year-old is run from the house because he's upset. And I'm like, talking to these kids. I end up holding both of them and convincing them to walk back home. I've given the other kid my jacket, and now I'm an hour and a half late to work, and my phone's broken, and they don't know why I'm not at work. And I, like, walk them back to the house and talk to the mom, and, talk with the kids and get them home. And I'm, like, walking back to work with my head down, and I'm like, oh, I'm needed. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know what I'm saying? Get to work, tell them what happened, because I have to, like, this is what happened. I know it sounds crazy. And my boss is like, I'm working at Buffalo, like, oh my God, no, Precious. It's cool. We got you. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? So I feel like there was always that opportunity.
That is so beautiful. I think that's such a big part of recovery, right? Is getting out of our own stuff, even
Right.
though your stuff is so valid. I mean, the
Word.
stuff you've been through is a lot of people wouldn't have made it through, and it's understandable. But
Word.
it is that feeling of, especially, like, as a 12-step person myself, when people say,
Yes.
like, what helped you the most? One of them is being of service to other people. And it doesn't even have to be like going to a disaster site and, like,
Right.
digging people out of a rubble kind of a thing. It can be literally just being there for a friend, being there to listen to somebody, and getting out of your own way, getting out of
Word.
your own head, so that it's like your stuff is important, but there's other people that can use the love that you have to share.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. True story. I'm like, so I always tell people, like, our recovery stories are so different, right? Because people are like, well, how did you do it? Because I've officially been, it's been over a year and a half now, right? We talk about April. I think, what month are we in? Time. What is time? Um
It's almost August.
August. So it's been a
Yeah.
year and some months. And I've had those moments where people are around me, just partying atmospheres, where I go into different energies and all that. And they're like, how do you not do it? And it's because I'm able to choose to feel. I know I choose to feel. But also, I box. Like, that is literally my like, it is my management tool. It is how I work through things, and it is my coping mechanism, because you can cope and still manage and work through using your coping mechanism. What is that? And it's like boxing for me. If I didn't have listen, I'm going to be real. If I didn't have boxing, I wouldn't be able to handle this world. If I'm not in nature, if I
Mhm.
have to be in this world, I'd have to cope. I mean, I understand why people are addicted to being checked out, right? Like I get it. Like I get it. And we all have different strengths and different things we need to make stronger, right? I don't like to say weaknesses, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but for me it's boxing. Like I learned like the only way out is in, right? And and having understanding like boxing for me is how I deal with that. So like people look at me as like, well, you're different. You didn't go through a program. You didn't. I'm like, I know I did go through a program. It just looks different. And if I didn't have boxing, I don't think I'd be able to cope. And I would be going through a program. I like,
Yeah.
and I would hope that that works for me, but I don't know if it would because I need so much movement. I need so much to work through. So we're all different. It just looks different. You know what I mean? I feel like when I look at it, I'm like, I may have crashed and burned 12 times and went back to boxing before I recovered. You know what I mean? Like I'm just, it's just a process. Being human is challenging. It's a process.
Yep. And you don't, yeah. And whatever works for you. And I think you're right, because not only is boxing a passion, but it's the challenge of the physical challenge. And
Right.
also when we have anxiety, we have to get that out. It's
Right.
somatic. It's like it's in our body, it's in our cells, and we're holding on to it. And that just starts to spin and spin and spin if we don't get it out. I'm the same. I'm very physically fit because
Right.
that the endorphins, the adrenaline, the challenge of it. Even for me, it's yoga, which is not the kind of challenge
Yes.
that boxing is.
It's
It's a
harder.
move. Yeah, it's a move. Well, I don't think so. Well, yeah, but it's
It's
more of a
different.
mental challenge where you're taking your focus on your movement and your breath
Right.
and being still and present. And when you're boxing, I would imagine you're present.
Right.
You're in that moment. Nothing else around you matters, and you're getting adrenaline, and it's
Yeah.
challenge and it's strategy and it's all
Yeah.
these
If you're a
things that.
professional.
Mhm.
There's levels to boxing. Like the level that I'm at with understanding boxing, I'm going to be honest, 99% of people aren't even at. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot to learn. Boxing is like life. So there's a lot to unlock in boxing.
It's
You
not
know
just
what I mean?
punching.
Oh no. No,
Mm-mm.
in fact like when I'm a hyper elevated empath. Like when people throw power, where do they get their power from? What are their experiences and where does that power come from? So if power is let's say some people's they get their power comes from the pain they've experienced. Well, there's different types of pain, right? You have sharp pain, you have heavy pain. So when people hit me with their power, I absorb them and I learn people in the ring through emotion. You know what I'm saying? Clear sentience, whatever you want to call it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But being in this world as a boxer, it's like, oh, like emotions show up when you're aware of yourself. People don't know like things come up out of the body, so they're touching me, and I'm like, oh, I know when people want to hurt me, and I know when people want to work through their shit.
Yeah.
Right? Like in the ring, like I recognize that. It's not personal, but it's like, oh, okay, cool. I recognize when like, oh, I triggered this person. Like something happened there. They don't see me. They see like their trauma. Now they want to kill me. Like it like, you know what I'm saying? There's a lot to tap into. Which is like what I'm into is like the understanding of energy through movement and exchange with a human. That's what boxing is when you're hyper aware.
That is so beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you a word that I would just want you to riff on in this
Yeah.
context: forgiveness.
Mm, mm, my favorite
Yeah.
word. Yeah. Very good. My middle name means Mother of Eternal Forgiveness, so we're working with that. Mercedes.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Word. Forgiveness. Oh, it's so deep. It's so much depth, right? Like when you say about like because forgiveness for me it's really simple. For me, right? But the depth of it is like how do we get to forgiveness before acceptance, right? So there's these levels like I forgiveness is it's if you have the ability to accept, it doesn't mean you have the ability to forgive. Okay? forgiveness comes in a process. And if we understand that process, right, we understand that I'm not upset with anyone that doesn't have the ability to forgive at this time, right? It wears and tears on the individual, right? It eats you up inside. It creates things inside, but there's a process, right? And that the levels of to get there, it's like you have acceptance, right? Which is like the I always say the warm up and the finish line are the hardest things in life, right? So the warm up is acceptance. You're like, oh my God, it's great, finally. But just because I accept that you're an asshole doesn't mean that I forgive you. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to let go of all the time that you were an asshole. I just accept that you're an asshole, right? Like, it's like that. Then you have these processes of like acceptance, and then you have letting go. And in between acceptance and letting go, you have a major healing process to even get there. And there's these boundaries to get in these levels. Forgiveness is, oh, it's just not, it's a lot, right? It's a lot. Like forgiveness, self-forgiveness, forgiveness, you know what I mean? And in forgiveness, there's accountability. That's like the finish towards the finish line of forgiveness. It's like accountability, because it gets tricky. It gets really triggering for people, like kind of realizing that not everything, but a lot of what we've experienced, even especially as adults, like we are kind of accountable for. Like, that's like, and then because you got to go through this process of accountability, right? If recognizing where I ignored all these things, or where there's all this stuff, and then forgiveness and accountability of like, well, what about when I was a kid and all these things happened to me? Well, forgiveness for me comes from like, who would I be if I didn't go through that? And damn, I'm so thankful. Like, yes, she deserves her judgment and she has to go through her experiences as my stepmom, but I'm so grateful for her making me so mentally strong and emotionally understanding, and like making me tough. Listen, the level of boxing, I can box with the best of them. People don't even understand. Sometimes I'm in there with aggressive grown ass men. And it's like, not saying I should be, but it's just like, I wouldn't be the warrior that I am if I didn't go through the things that I went through. And so I have to be grateful for everyone in my journey, and I forgive them because, hey, their process is their process. Their process is their process. And if I'm grateful for who I am today and my process, then I definitely forgive them for all this bullshit they did, because like I wouldn't be where I'm at right now. We wouldn't be having this conversation. I wouldn't be able to do the work that I do with others. I wouldn't be the amazing boxer that I am. You know what I mean? I wouldn't be at this level if I wouldn't have gotten through the experiences. And so forgiveness it's a process. And like, as much as I want everyone, I mean, like, if everybody could forgive, our world would just be perfect.
Yeah.
Like, like true, like levels of forgiveness, it would be perfect, right? But I think that forgiveness really comes from an act of self-love and self-understanding, right? Like, it's in that world of, self-love and self-understanding. And then it goes into awareness of just everything, right? There's just a depth of awareness that what is good and what is not good, right? And you look at people and see their experiences, and you're like, it's wild that like the most I've met the most terrifyingly beautiful people. I've met, some might say the foulest of the foul, and some might say the brightest of the bright. And there's a thin line that we walk between good and not good. And forgiveness lives on both sides, no matter what side you walk on.
That's amazing. I
It's
know.
just waiting. If you're not, it's just waiting for you. It doesn't matter. And then we go into like everyone can change. And that's I know people are like, no, I know some. Yes, I know. I know. We are a microcosm of a macrocosm. Everything is constantly changing. We are in fucking Mercury pre-shadow retrograde that feels like a triple Mercury retrograde. We are going through change after change, our political systems. There's stuff happening every day. Don't tell me change can happen in a moment, right? And so forgiveness chills with it, all the sides. It's there. It's always there. It's always there. It's always welcome. It's this open space for all. That's just, we just have to do it. It's just there.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it.
Amen. I hope you'll write a book. I don't know if you feel like writing a book, but you could if you wanted to,
Right.
if you ever feel moved, but otherwise just you using your voice,
I gotta find a
sharing.
charger. Keep talking.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You using your voice, sharing your insights, being the person that you are makes a difference in this world. I'll let you fight. I'll let you
Thank
just
you.
like,
You're
yeah,
good.
yeah.
I'm still listening. I'm
Yeah,
receiving.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm excited. I mean, I'm excited to share your story, but the way that you did. I mean, you shared it, but this is exactly why I'm doing this podcast, because it's so important to understand that, look, we all go through shit. Like life is,
Yes.
that's why we're here. At least that's my belief, is that our souls choose the journeys, whether you believe that or not. All of these things happen and we're able to grow from them. It doesn't mean these things happen and it's all great, but
Right.
beautiful things can come from them. And it's just about seeking the opportunity. It's also about understanding that we're all doing the best we can. We're all doing the best we can with the information we have. So clearly for example, your stepmother was a very traumatized person or a very mentally
Yes.
ill person or both.
Right. Right.
I'm sure she was abused or had
Right.
mental illness, and it doesn't mean it's excusable. It doesn't mean that you let them back in. It doesn't mean that you aren't allowed to feel angry or hurt or wronged, but also it's I think of that is trying to just understand, picturing them as a little kid.
Right.
And I always try to do that. Like, this person was once a little kid and they were just innocent and
Mm-hmm.
something happened along the
Right.
way. It does not excuse abuse, but it explains it. So
Right.
it is kind of about seeing the humanity. And unfortunately, sometimes they hurt people beyond repair. Like, there are things
Right.
that you're never going to be the same. You're always going to feel that pain, but it's what
Mm-hmm.
you do with it. And fortunately, now we have so many different forms of PTSD therapy, and PTSD and trauma is in the
Right.
forefront, and people understand that how badly it really affects people. So there's hope. And your story
Yes.
is one of those where I'm just so moved and so inspired. And
Thank
I just
you.
thank you so
You're
much.
welcome. Yeah.
And
I think like my
yeah,
duty is to like understand. Like that's one of my main
yeah.
purpose is to understand. And so like my thing is like understanding doesn't mean anybody's a good person or a not good person. It's not giving anyone an excuse, right? It's just like, oh, I understand. And when you can learn to understand, it makes life a lot smoother. And sometimes it's okay, and being okay with not understanding. Like some things are just like, oh, some people you're like, I just don't have to understand, you know? But in order to understand, I look at people and I look deeply and I say, especially when it's uncomfortable, is when I say, what happened to you as a child to make you like this?
Hmm.
Right? That's literally what I go into. I'm like, it doesn't justify it because we're grown, we can
Right.
make this, but it's how I can see people. I'm like, what happened to you?
Yeah.
I always have this question when I deal with certain individuals and just people and energies. I'm like, I don't have to engage with them, but I do process like, so what happened to you to make you this way?
Hmm.
And yes, we have a choice on how we want to be in this world, but it doesn't change like something happened, you
Yeah.
know. There's that wounded child energy we talk about, you know, and that's how I just see it. Like it's easy for me. Forgiveness is, you know, flow.
Yeah.
It's feel and flow. That's what that's feel and flow.
Yeah. And it can be hard, but I'm like that too. I have trouble. I mean, I don't hold grudges most of the time. I mean, never. I don't hold grudges.
Right.
I look at it as, I actually feel sorry for you.
Right.
I feel sad that that's how you're going through the world, and I pray
Right.
for you.
Yeah.
And so I just thank you so much for being here and
Thank you
for
for
sharing
asking
your
me.
story. And I'm so excited to follow your career.
Yes.
And you and
Yes.
I are going to still be friends, but for everyone else, I'm just excited for them to watch you.
Yeah. I'm fighting.
And
I'm fighting soon.
tell me about
So
that.
okay, so I fight August. I'm 3-0 with 3 KOs. I'm fighting August 20th in Nashville, and you can actually watch it. You can stream it, Shannon. All of you, you can stream it.
Yeah.
It's going to be on Country Box 24/7. And you can look that up on the and it
Okay.
pops and it'll be on there. You'll see the next event is August 20th. You'll be able to free stream that and watch that.
Amazing.
But if you follow me on IG or whatever, you can follow me, and I post all my stuff so people can watch and
Amazing.
really enjoy the journey.
I'm going to put a link, but just in case somebody happens to be visually impaired, what's your Instagram?
My Instagram is you can look up Precious Harris McCray. Okay, first off, Harris
Yeah.
hyphen MCCRAY. There's a picture of me boxing, so you'll see me in the ring. You'll see it's a boxer's picture. Right. The Instagram is pressure_7 spelled like following PR3SSUR3_7.
Thank
Yeah.
you. All right,
Yeah.
Precious. Thank you for being an inspiration.
Thank you
You
for
are an
having me.
American treasure.
Yeah. Word, Shannon. Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to more in the future.
Likewise.
Word.